The Phantom Caller. The town of Raven Hollow had never known fear until the first phone call came, chilling Mara to the bone with a voice that promised blood. "You have 24 hours, the voice whispered, its low tone laced with malice before the line went dead. Mara, shaken and panicked, called the police, but no one believed her until her neighbor was found dead, matching the caller's description. Detective Casey, a seasoned officer in the small town, was assigned to investigate the bizarre and horrifying murder. As Casey surveyed the crime scene, he couldn't shake the eerie feeling that this murder was just the beginning. That night, a second call came, this time to an elderly man, who was warned that his time was running out. Casey worked tirelessly, racing against time, but the next morning, the old man was found dead in his home, throat slit. The media frenzy that followed the killings spread fear like wildfire, and the town of Raven Hollow became gripped by paranoia. Every phone ring sent a shiver down residents' spines, as no one knew who would be next to receive the phantom call. Casey reviewed the patterns, noticing the killer's calculated moves, each murder a perfect echo of the threats from the call. The third call came to a local teacher, who frantically called the police, but the voice taunted her with a promise of death. Despite extra police patrols and heightened vigilance, the teacher was murdered the following night, just as predicted. Casey's frustration grew as the killer seemed to always be one step ahead, leaving no trace behind. Glen, an old friend of Casey's from the force, called to offer advice, but something about the conversation felt off. The calls became more frequent, the killings more brutal, each murder unraveling the fragile calm of the once peaceful town. Casey began to suspect the killer was someone with inside knowledge of police procedures, someone who knew how to evade them. Mara, still haunted by her own call, reached out to Casey, convinced there was something more sinister behind these crimes. Her description of the voice struck a nerve in Casey, reminding him of an old case, one that had gone unsolved years ago. The case involved a disgruntled officer who had been forced into early retirement after a high-profile investigation went wrong. Casey dug into the files, discovering that the officer had vanished after his career ended, leaving behind a trail of anger. The calls continued, each more chilling than the last, and the town's fear grew into a collective panic. Casey worked day and night, driven by a sense of guilt that he could have prevented the chaos if he had solved the old case. The killer taunted him with every call, mocking his efforts and daring him to catch up before the next victim fell. A new clue surfaced, a fragment of a recording from one of the calls that sounded eerily familiar to Casey. The voice was Glen's, distorted but recognizable, his tone now dripping with the same malice heard in each phantom call. Casey's stomach twisted as the pieces fell into place. Glen was the phantom caller, seeking revenge for his failed career. Glen had been nursing a grudge ever since the case that destroyed his reputation, and now he was making the town pay. Casey kept his discovery secret, knowing Glen would anticipate every move if he knew Casey was onto him. The next call came to Mara again, and this time, Glen's voice was unmistakable, promising her that her time was almost up. Casey raced to Mara's house, hoping to intercept Glen before he could carry out his final threat. As he approached the house, Casey saw a figure moving in the shadows, a cold sweat breaking out on his skin. Glen was there, lurking just beyond the porch, waiting to strike, his silhouette barely visible in the night. Casey confronted him, gun drawn, as Glen's face twisted into a smile, his eyes dark with years of pent-up rage. "You never listened," Glen sneered, his voice the same one that had terrorized the town over the phone. Casey's hand shook, knowing that if he didn't act fast, Mara would become the next victim of Glen's deranged game. Glen lunged forward, a knife glinting in his hand, but Casey fired first, the gunshot echoing through the silent street. Glen fell to the ground, gasping for breath, his revenge incomplete as his life slipped away beneath the night sky. Mara rushed out, shaking, but alive, her narrow escape a bitter relief after the weeks of terror. The town slowly began to recover, but the scars left by Glen's reign of terror would never truly heal. Casey's victory was bittersweet, as he was left wondering if he could have prevented the tragedy from the start. He stood alone at the cemetery days later, staring at the grave of the first victim, guilt gnawing at him. The town mourned the dead, holding a candlelight vigil to remember the lives taken by Glen's twisted vendetta. Casey tried to move on, but the sound of a ringing phone always sent a chill through his spine. The case was closed, but Raven Hollow would never be the same, its residents forever haunted by the phantom caller. Mara left town shortly after, unable to shake the feeling that the horror could begin again at any moment. Casey returned to his desk, the pile of unfinished cases a reminder that justice was never truly complete. The police force put Glen's actions behind them, but whispers still filled the air whenever a phone rang. Casey visited Glen's grave in secret, unsure if he was seeking closure or punishment for his role in what had happened. The sun set over Raven Hollow, casting long shadows across the town as its people clung to the fragile peace that remained. A new phone line was installed at the station, and Casey couldn't help but wonder if anyone would dare answer it. The killings had stopped, but the town's fear had not, lingering like a dark cloud over every home and business. Casey continued his work, but the weight of the phantom caller's legacy followed him wherever he went. The memory of Glen's voice on the phone haunted Casey's dreams, a reminder of how close the killer had been all along. Even in the quietest moments, Casey felt the presence of the phantom caller, lurking just beyond his reach. The phone rang once more in Casey's office, and for a brief moment, he hesitated before picking up the receiver. A voice spoke on the other end, but it was just a wrong number, leaving Casey with a strange sense of dread. He hung up the phone, staring at it for a long time, wondering if the nightmare was truly over. The town remained on edge, and Casey knew that some horrors never truly end, no matter how many times the phone stops ringing. The phantom caller was gone, but the fear he instilled in Raven Hollow would never die, forever etched in the town's history.